Hey everyone, it's Dr. Tom Moorcroft here. I'm so excited to welcome you to this episode of the Full Cup Life podcast. Today, my guest is Trevor Hash. Trevor is a movement and lifestyle coach that I met through a program he does with his brother called Primal Athlete. And what's really interesting is that so much of the way, they talk so much about freedom as a lifestyle, learning how to get into the flow of who you are. I've learned so much about going back and really reigniting that child inside that allows health to flow through my body. And, it's kind of like so important to me to get this message out because we're talking about really kind of in today's episode about being comfortable with our setbacks, right? So there's no real failures. There's these learning opportunities. And within those setbacks, we have these in our lives, we get to the point where we realize that there's a gem that's going to help us move forward. And we also talk a lot about overcorrection. So many people with chronic illness or even just recovering from a sports injury, we overcorrect, we try too hard. And sometimes we need to go back to create space in order for things to blossom in our lives. We're also going to be talking a lot about fear and the different holding patterns that we have, and really how you can take control back. And so I'm so happy that Trevor came to share all his knowledge with us. And, we're also going to talk about how to easily create ideal habits, like with your morning and evening routines. And if you don't have them, Trevor's got these tips that are going to blow your mind to get you moving in that direction. So if you want to learn a lot more about how to just really unleash the inner health within you, to move more with more freedom, more flow, and to really design your life in a way that allows you to express your personal freedom and your personal passion, then join me for this interview with Trevor Hash. You're going to love it. We have an amazing guest today, my good friend Trevor Hash here. And truth be told, one of the reasons that we're sitting here talking is I joined one of his programs, which I'm sure we'll dive into. And he's been coaching me through learning how to move my body more naturally and more primally, which has really opened up a lot of things for me. And throughout the time working together, I've really realized that Trevor's onto something here. And he moves not only freely in his own life, in his own way, but he helped me learn how to find that freedom for myself in a way that I didn't know. So I thought it'd be a great conversation here on Full Cup Life. So Trevor Hash, thanks for joining us, man.
Cool. Pleasure. Thanks so much for the kind introduction. Yeah, man, I'm stoked to be here.
It's great. So, I just figured we'd riff, and I'd love to learn more about kind of like what you kind of got you started, sort of what's the story, the evolution of getting into kind of more primal movements and creating Primal Athlete and all the other work you're doing, and sort of what got you going in it.
Yeah. So I grew up as an athlete, and like it was, when you're young, you create identity around what you do. And so I definitely like latched onto that. That was my full identity from a very young age. And then I actually suffered an injury. I don't know if I like the word suffered. I had an injury that really changed the course of my life. Mm-hmm. And I don't like the word suffered because I would say that injury really set forth some really cool things to happen in my life. And it's gotten me to where I am today. So I had to stop playing sports. And then all of a sudden,
holy cow,
who am I? Like, what's my identity? And so I tried to latch on to different things and went through some really, really hard times trying to figure out who I was. And eventually, after a lot of trial and error, I kind of ended up falling into this really cool, I'd say, I don't know what you would call it, like a lifestyle, a movement, like what we do, like
right.
It's kind of this all-encompassing way of living that's just it's primal in the sense of like we just like to do what comes natural, and so now I just try to live as naturally as I can. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome because like that's the thing. Like I feel like I was telling somebody the other day, like one of the things that and I even think we talked about it in one of our group meetings is I feel like I'm learning to be like a kid again. like going back and like sitting down on the ground, going back and moving in different ways that really just, you'd like, it's something that I wouldn't do if I was trying to pretend to be an adult. But if I was being Tom, I would do it no problem. Right. And so it's like that if I put that persona on, like you're saying, like hop onto the podcast voice and,
Yeah, exactly. gotta put out a specific face.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's essentially like what Josh and I have. Josh being my brother, who like we've partnered with a lot of the stuff we do as far as business. We basically like figure out we figure out what feels good for us, and then we see how we can really like chase those things and take what we can from it, and then eventually come back to some 0 point and say like, okay, that felt good for the moment. What feels good now? And I think a lot of times we get stuck like thinking, like chasing something, and never actually ever taking a step back and looking around and saying like, maybe that's not what I need. I did need that, but maybe it's not what I need right now. So, and like that goes for our movement practices that we like to do, but also just in life in general,
Yeah, it's so interesting because through the programs, I feel like it's that weaving all of it through the movement. And it's like, hey, maybe you need more intensity. Maybe you need more reps. Maybe you need a lot less reps. And like you always tell me, because I tend to go, and I just want to get it right. It's like, you're like, hey, step back and get it right. Like, but do one clean rep where you really fully experience it, and then just go do something else and play. And I'm like, because I come from an athletic background, tons of injuries, same thing, Trevor. And it's like, man, if I had only really listened to my body back then, and my coach didn't push me and I didn't listen to the coach,
Yeah. Oh, yes, I have two things to say. Yes, like I think that coming from an athletic background, I'd say most of the message we hear is that more is better. Keep pushing, just layering on volume after more intensity, and eventually, like it weeds out the people who can handle it and who won't. And like a lot of times, that's a coach's intention, but it doesn't take into account the individual. And so the problem is that we still have that coach in our mind telling us to do more, even though that coach did not have our best intention in mind.
Yes.
And second, I also did have coaches who didn't do that, and I didn't listen to them. And so I selectively didn't hear those things. And it's so interesting because there were definitely coaches along the way who were telling me things that like I would tell my students now. And it's just so funny to think that,
but you
like,
didn't recognize
that
it back
was
then.
there. I didn't grab it. Yeah, I didn't take it at all. It was on deaf ears for sure.
Well, it's
sometimes
like,
you're just not ready to hear something.
Right. Well, and I think society goes against most of what you just said, right? I mean, I think it's like push harder, work harder, do more. And that's the only way to achieve is by pushing and forcing. And the only thing I've ever achieved by pushing and forcing is broken things.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so what was like, I mean, like, what were you doing and what was your injury, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so I played football and basketball in the university, and I should say I never even stepped foot on the football field because I injured my shoulder going into freshman year, and that was a shoulder dislocation that ended up becoming really chronic. My shoulder dislocated for the next 10 years of my life, just all the time.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that like it's so limiting because it starts to enter into the way you navigate the world, not just like your sport. And so I it's been a long journey of like figuring out what's really inside of my body, and like what's just fear around dislocating again, but really just like fear manifesting in general.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's why I'm saying like it's been such a blessing for me, because it's really like it's just a cool way to learn lessons. I just think of it as like it's taught me so many lessons about life just in this one little thing that's my shoulder. So it sucks, but it's cool at the same time.
Well, and I think there's two things that really jump out at me. Is I see a lot of patients who have chronic infections. They're sick and they are so afraid to get better. They're so afraid to try the next treatment because it might flare them up and make them hurt worse. They're even afraid to not do something. Like it's like the fear is just all around our society. And I mean, you look at the current pandemic, and I mean, it's so much of the misinformation out there is because of the fear. But the other part is, so I'm really in the same boat as you. It's like looking at the blessing side of it. And I definitely want to talk more about that. The other thing though that strikes me is you just told us about your recurrent 10 years of dislocated shoulders. And I've seen you do in videos, do crap with your shoulder that most people with normal shoulders don't think they can do, right? With rings and different maneuvers and skin the cats and way more advanced stuff like that. Like, so how do you overcome the fear? And I mean, maybe I think for me that if you can hit two pieces for us, one is just physically, how do you start to move in a direction of healing? But then the more important part, I think, is how do you get over that emotional piece of that fear when you're afraid this thing's going to fall out and like rip your arm off,
Yeah, for real. So yeah. I love these questions. So physically, I actually I work in corrective exercise as well. So like this is something that this is a conversation I get to have all the time. So it's actually I feel like people make corrective exercise and like physical therapy, whatever that means nowadays, because there's so many different iterations of it that it's confusing and muddled. And but as far as like the corrective exercise, the movement goes, it's quite simple. You look at something that either you can't do that you should be able to do, and that maybe needs a trained eye. Like you should know what a body should be capable of. So you look at what you can't do, or you look at what's painful for you to do that you should be able to do. And then you develop a plan of how to get there.
Right.
And you take it in very small steps, right? And so for me personally, the initial iteration of getting my shoulder healthy was finding the spots that were painful and then exposing myself to things that were on the threshold of pain more often and getting stronger and more resilient in those. And then finding the positions that I would normally dislocate in and just spending more time there. And like, really, that's what corrective exercise is. It's like, it's just trying to find those things and work on them as regularly as you can without overdoing it and without potentially re-injuring yourself. And
right.
There will be moments where you do re-injure yourself if you do really have like it's going to happen. Like getting really comfortable with setbacks was a big part of my journey.
Ooh.
Oh man, I went too far, which means I'm out for 2 weeks. Bummer. What am I gonna do now? Like deal with it, right? I mean, it's a part of everyone's journey, and like everyone gets so down with the setback. Like it's such a negative connotation, but it doesn't have to be. It's just a mindset. You can frame it however you want.
Well, it sounds like it's okay to fail.
Oh yeah. No doubt. I would even say, I mean, just in the same way, like you probably don't consider failures actual failures because they're just learning opportunities, right?
Got it. Yep.
In that way, it's the same thing as in what we're talking about, like a small setback. It's just information, and it's just your body communicating with you. So how are you going to interpret it? That's really what matters.
You know, it's so interesting. We're talking about rehabilitating your shoulder basically and other sports things. This is exactly the way I talk to all my folks with Lyme disease. It's just like you're gaining that information. And when things happen, I, as the doctor, and you, as you know, the corrective exercise specialist, get information. But we learn information about our own bodies. And like, I don't know if you saw my video from the other day, but like working on sort of the muscle ups, I was kind of in the wrong position. So when you said to move back, I moved it. And when I did it once and it was great. And then one of the next times I shot straight through and my arms went flying sideways. But yeah, but I was like, oh, I wasn't staying tight. So you think and it's interesting for anybody out there who's listening who hasn't videotaped yourself doing something you think you do well. It's really funny.
Oh, yeah.
At least when you're watching me.
Oh, I still have the experience consistently. It's great. And I would say that first off, to your point, like it's almost always these like overcorrections, and then your window, it definitely starts to get smaller because that you learn how to not overcorrect so far, and then you find a sweet point. But at the same time, it's a moving target. So like yes, like you get better at it, but at some point the target moves and you're gonna have to relearn it again anyways.
Right.
So just get comfortable with failing, with overshooting, overcorrecting. It's part of life. It's part of the journey. Embrace it.
That's good, man. I love it. And so from that emotional aspect of fear, because I mean, I moving into physical pain is one thing, but then when you start to have to really look at what's behind that, I mean, how do you get past that? What's been your experience of maybe even some setbacks in that area that taught you how to get by it, right?
Yeah, no doubt. So this is oh man, it's a bit more abstract. So I think where I first started to really just realize that I had a lot of fear was by holding patterns that I would find myself in, right? So how fear was manifesting in my body physically. And for my shoulder, it's fairly obvious, like a lot of like trying to keep it close to my body, to my center, so that I could take care of it. But then also just like noticing where fear manifested in my body for other reasons. And that was really cool. So then just the realization I had fear was the first step,
right?
Like admitting you have a problem is the first step. So like, yeah, so just understanding there was a lot of fear inside of it was important. And then I would say like a lot of purposeful exploration of the fear is actually, like, I still have to go through this consistently. Like it's still a part of my practice where I purposely put myself somewhere I'm uncomfortable, and then I just really like go inside myself and say like what's happening inside you, how are you feeling, where like are you safe. And like a lot of times it's just convincing, I wouldn't say convincing, just recognizing that like you are safe here. It's okay, you can still be you and be comfortable, even though there is a perceived threat. The threat isn't real. And that's not to say that there are no real threats, but it's like it's the same way, like incrementally unraveling the fear around that physically for me was important. And I would say like that's the same, I'm sure that would be the same way someone would approach any type of fear in general, is just exposing yourself a little bit more over time.
Yep.
Just like realizing like there is safety here. I'm okay. I'm still me.
It's cool that you say that, because in the work that I do, we talk a lot about polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve and yada yada. But it's basically,
dude, I'm literally reading the polyvagal theory book right now.
Are you really? No kidding.
Title is. Yeah.
Well, it's
Super cool.
interesting to me because a lot of people who know my work, I mean, I talk a lot about the nervous system and sympathetic, fight or flight, parasympathetic, joy, relaxation, rejuvenation, digestion, sleep. But then there's that other part of, as you're reading about that, we really get this. If fight or flight is like, I can run away or I can stay and fight, but I can win. And then when we get into that place of that the dorsal vagal, we get very stuck in this freeze state because we're at a place where we don't feel safe and we feel the only way to survive is to freeze. And like, it's like if the chipmunk is caught by the cat, it freezes and the cat usually gets bored, lets it go and it scampers off. So when you said that, it was really interesting to me because safety is the critical component here, and the real or perceived. I want everyone to really dial in on that because a lot of people get in their mind that that people are making up fear or they're just not strong enough, but perceived fear is as real or more real than real fear, So the comment on the perceived, that learning to understand that perceived fear doesn't need to remain perceived as fear and to become safe. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean that's been an integral piece of just also just me creating the person that I want to be, like just realizing that there's a lot of constraints I've put around who I am and what I do that aren't real. They're just perceived, and a lot of those were completely fear. I'll tell you what, I never danced in my life until like 3 years ago. And now that's like what I do. That's like all I do. And it was literally just like I just had this block, this fear of being judged that was so physiologically ingrained in my system. And I went to a music festival and I one time just said, you know what, like this is BS. Like I'm done with this. And I had danced.
Nice.
And then like from that day forward, I dance. I mean, I don't dance almost every day now. Like it's literally one of my passions. So so like you can change anything about yourself, I think it's so powerful.
I think it really is like that. I just love it. It's creating the me I want to be is kind of what I got out of that. It's like you sort of reinvent yourself. But what is it about movement? Because I mean, a lot of the work you do, I mean, certainly, you get a little bit of dance moves breakdown in the middle of some of these, but also what is it like? Tell me more about kind of like how you got in the movement and is there any specific sort of influences? Because guys, you got to go check out videos of Trevor moving. I mean, it's like fluid, it's like, I talk about my daughter skiing moguls down a ski slope. It's like water going down a hill. If you want to see water flow movement, check out Trevor and Josh. I mean, it's crazy because it's like, you can see the lack of fear in the movement or the authenticity. It's not that there's no fear at all, but there's so much authenticity in the way you move. And I would love to know more about where that all comes from, other than just, I know obviously explore it a lot.
So, I mean, I feel like this, the first part of this is going to be very anticlimactic, but I think at some point, most people they start off with a pursuit of something, with it being a very externally driven, right? And so I think like really my motivation was like, I want to do cool stuff so that people think I'm cool, right? Like I think that's how I first got into it. Then of course, like it's developed into then it's developed into my own practice that really what I've found personally is it allows me to express a lot of what I have inside of me that I don't have like a really powerful means or vehicle to get out other than movements. And I think it comes from like I've never felt very strong with verbal communication.
Mm-hmm.
I always feel like my meaning doesn't get conveyed as well as I would like and also I have a hard time, especially conveying like how I feel.
Yeah.
And it's something I work on regularly. My partner makes me, first of all. No, she doesn't make me, but
But
she's like, that's basically
yeah.
what she does professionally. So like we talk about it a lot, but at the same time, like I still have all these emotions inside of me, and like all these feelings, and I find that movement allows me to express all of that genuinely
Yeah.
and authentically. And I think most people want something like that, and some people have that. And if you don't, you should. Like, you should have some means of expression.
Yes. Yeah. One of the things that's so interesting to me is like, I claim that I'm not a morning person because my mom wasn't a morning person and my dad was. And growing up, I was like closer to my mom. And she said, "You're like me, a night owl." And I was like, so I assumed that role. Right. And it's like, as I've kind of gotten older, like everybody's like, "What's your morning routine?" I'm like, I have an evening routine, you know, and but I just took some of the simple things you talked about that. And I just noticed that creating a simple routine, even 5 minutes of movement in the beginning of my day, totally changes the whole course of everything. 60 seconds of like 3 or 4 movements. And I'm just like, it's a different thing. And I just wondered, like, you guys talk a lot about like shaking and such. And I think it is I feel like if you shake for legit for 30 to 60 seconds, I feel like I've meditated for a half an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine it really has a lot to do with just moving energy. Um, there's plenty of ways to move energy, but if you're looking for something fast, there's breathing practices, shaking or movement practices. Like, some of these things can just get it moving immediately. And I've had really profound experiences. I know, both with those two, breathing and shaking. Like, I've burst into tears doing both before.
Mhm.
And they're just something about them that, like, that immediately bring you into the moment. And yeah, and so, like, that's why I mean, we make it a big part of the Primal Athlete, because I think that a lot of people don't realize they're in this like low grade stressed and anxiety driven state. And sometimes all you need is that moment to pull you out, to
Yeah.
say like, like, I was stressed, and now I can think clearly, and now I can make a better decision about how I'm going to navigate my day,
Mm.
or about whatever you have in front of you. how
Yeah.
many how many how many life decisions are made under stress? Like, that's not a good way to navigate your life.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I think when you start to think about it, it's like, I remember one of my teachers said, "Hey, just relax your jaw." And he's like, "You probably weren't even realizing that your jaw was tight." And I'm like, yeah, you're right.
So true.
Half the time we don't even know what the hell's going on in our own body.
It's so true. And I would say that that's why, like, in the Primal Athlete, we have a morning practice. I personally have like a 0 point practice where I just come back to the same thing every morning, and just check in and like see where the tension is in my body, see where the tension is in my mind, and like, and just
Mhm.
it it's cool because it doesn't force you to take care of it, but just to acknowledge it, just to notice it, and like say, okay, so I'm obviously stressed today. Maybe today isn't a day I should make like big life decisions, and I should probably like take some recovery. It's can be as simple as that.
And it's such a good wisdom, because it sounds like, I feel like we all just feel like we have to make these decisions. Like, oh, I got to do it right now. But if now's not the right time to do it, or I have to fix the tension that I found.
Mm.
You know, like you were saying, like just acknowledge
Our
it.
obsession with like foam rolling, right? Like that's a manifestation of like, there should be no tension. I found this, I need to roll on it for 30 minutes to get rid of it, right?
Right?
It's like, it's okay.
It's there.
You're
Don't
gonna be
fight
fine.
reality.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I bet you, if you just stop fixating, it'll probably go away faster.
Wait, hold
Huh,
on. We
huh.
might need to rewind and recap that. If we stop fixating, it might go away quicker. I want everybody to hear that, especially all those folks out there who are suffering with. I mean, it's interesting. I just almost said the suffering word. I would love to dive into suffering for a minute because and get a little more of your take on it, because I think that that's a uniquely human condition that we can create a lot more of or a lot less of. But I'd love to hear what your feelings are and what your experience has been.
Mm. So, man, that's a great question. Where would I start with this? I mean, I guess I could tie it back to my shoulder. So,
Right.
like, I would say I've learned a lot about suffering through my shoulder, so it's an easy way for me to talk about it. So, um, I've definitely found that the more attention I give something, and I think there's a sweet spot, but like definitely crossing that threshold past something being productive, you definitely start to just feel inadequate all the time,
Mhm.
and that is the worst I ever feel, is when I'm feeling inadequate. And
Yeah.
so like if you create these fixations or these obviously we could come back to some sort of Eastern philosophy and say like some sort of attachment to something, right? And
Right. Right.
the idea of like me being good, like a safe or a good shoulder, like a perfect shoulder. If I've attached to the idea of ever having a perfect shoulder, every moment I don't have it, I feel inadequate. And so like just accepting that this is my reality and I'll be okay is like it's all good. And so in that way, I think that's how I end up organizing my mental space is whenever I find myself um, really like just ruminating, fixating on something, and it's creating some sort of suffering, I immediately acknowledge it and 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 see it for what it is. At least I'm not always able, like you're not always able to just let it
Right.
go, but see it for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because like I talk about it all the time. I have my definitions around it, but man, there's days where I'm great and I can do what you just said, and other days I'm like, damn, maybe it's not my best day, but I'm still going to do the best I can in that moment. You know?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's all you can do. And for that and like to that matter, like if you I've seen people get so obsessed with not having attachments that they're attached to that idea, and it creates a suffering around that, because every time you end up
Right?
feeling that way that you just explained, it's a bad thing. It doesn't have to be bad. You framed it that way.
Yes. Well, so that's for me. Like the thing is, like my dogs, like you step on their toes, by accident or whatever, or they hurt themselves, and they're just like they yelp and they're in pain, and then they're like, "Oh, hey, I'm good." Do. As soon as they look around, they know they're safe. They're good. But like for me, I stub my toe. I'm like, "Fuck, god damn it," and I'm like all wound up, and I'm like, but and then I'm like, my toe's in pain, and then I make the assumption it shouldn't have happened, and then when I fight reality, that's when I'm suffering big time.
Well, and yeah. Oh man. This just like sparked a quick memory I had where, so, I think we're definitely dancing around like how we talk to ourselves, like our internal dialogue really creates our reality. And so the way you use language is very important. And what you just said, it reminded me of, I was watching a TED talk just the other day, and this woman said that, and I'm gonna completely butcher this. I was not 100% engaged in the video, but it was so interesting. She said that there are certain languages where if there was an accident, then you wouldn't assert blame anywhere. Like it just happened.
Yep.
Whereas in English, it's always like, I did this to myself, or you did this to me, or like there's always some sort of someone doing something to someone else or something,
Right.
rather than just saying it happened. Right. And so like in that way, if that's how I'm assuming how the dog is thinking about it, like, oh, that happened. It sucked for a sec, but really it's okay. But the second we try to put blame, point our fingers somewhere, it really makes us feel like slighted in some way,
Yeah.
even by ourselves, like you idiot.
Yeah.
Sorry, but
it's all good here. It's interesting, Trevor, because to me, this is one of my biggest things is like a lot of my folks feel betrayed in one of two ways. One, accidentally or purposely through the medical system, mostly accidentally, but they would like to blame someone for that and make it someone's fault. But the one that really, I think, brings us all down is when our body, we perceive it as our body betrayed us. I can't count on my body. I've got chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, these chronic infections, or my shoulder keeps coming out. What the frick is wrong with my body?
Mm-hmm. And then you start to look around and say, like, why didn't it happen to any of them?
Right?
Why is this happening to me? What's different about them? I mean, I've been there. I still have those thoughts once in a while on bad days. It's like, what did I do to deserve this? And it's not helpful. Even that it happened to you and it seems unfair. It's not helpful to frame it that way. Don't do it.
Now the next logical question is, how do we work away from that?
What,
right?
Like, what do you have in your control? And like, how can you still find a sense of wellness or joy inside of yourself with what you have? Because at the end of the day, like, that's really all we want is to feel fulfilled in some way. And we can all experience that regardless of our situation. Yes, it may be hard, but you can.
And you're worth it.
Of course.
Right? It's like, I think somebody was like, oh, I've lost this. It's not this, it's that. It's like, well, what do you want with what you've got? Because I certainly complain about this thing and that thing in my head and out loud sometimes. And it doesn't get me anywhere. And it's like, but what's really interesting to me is it sounds like you stopped complaining about your shoulder. You allowed that injury to teach you something. And now not only are you probably healthier than you've ever been, I would imagine from my own experience of previous like hardcore athletics and what I do now, I'm way healthier than I've ever been. And I would make that assumption, but it's like the other part is the impact you're having on the planet and positive impact on other people through your work that you may not have had, or you may have had if you hadn't had that shoulder thing.
Yeah. It's kind of like that. It's that synchronistic feeling where I couldn't have imagined my life going any other way, and like I found purpose in my life, and yeah, it's through something that was kind of shitty,
Right.
But I would imagine that like that's probably a lot of people's experiences are the things that were actually a struggle in their lives. Those are the things that really shape who you are. And on the other side, you're like, wow, I'm so glad I went through that, because now look what I have to show for it. So yeah, I wanted to actually like you really touched on like a really near and dear topic of like this uh, this like kind of like wanting to point the blame outwards, or like kind of feeling bad for yourself, kind of getting into this victim mindset.
Yeah.
So I personally I still work a lot with people who have like chronic hip pain, chronic shoulder pain, and it's amazing how much of a difference it can make to just get someone in the mindset that like I do have some control in the situation. Because the second you just give control over to someone else, or give control, or just give up control to whatever, the universe, like you end up it's just a really sad place to be.
Right.
Like, and again, I've been there. Like, I personally, when I had surgery on my shoulder, I was like, oh, well, this person can fix me.
Given
And
away.
then
Right.
I've just given away all of my sense of agency to this person who knows, they might not, but like I've just seen it inside in so many people. When you just give them some tools and say, hey, like, you can do this, you have some control.
Yep.
The world changes. They're happier, they smile more, like it's amazing. So man, I just love that topic, and it just makes me feel so good to think of all the people who I've just kind of like handed that to them. I didn't even really do anything, and they ran with it. So I love it.
Dude, it's so good too, because for me, like I'm going to say this the way I was going to say, because I noticed that like when you speak, you say a lot of yes and, which instead of yes but, which sounds very purposeful the way you enunciate it. And I think, like you said, our language is important. I think the second most important language is that comes out of our mouth, and the first most important language is what we say inside our heads. But I will say, so I'll go back and I'll rewind and I'll say what I was going to say before I realized I was going to say it in that way. But it's like, I get really frustrated when people give away their control and they think that healing and everything happens outside. So to reframe it, I'm really excited that you and I and people like us can have conversations to help people understand that they have more control over their health than society has often led them to believe. But I will admit, there is that piece of me that has to be aware that I get frustrated with that conversation so that I don't bring the frustration into it.
That's a good point. Yeah. I've done that. Definitely. And I've looked back at those conversations and just am like, man, like I really botched that.
Right.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. Cause I as well get very frustrated with, I don't find my frustration necessarily pointed at the person that's in front of me, or people I've worked with. I just see how a lot of the medical community and our culture has created this sense of helplessness around everything that is our bodies, our minds, our hearts, our souls. Like it's all outside of us, and it just makes me really sad.
Yeah, this external reliance. I like to me, I'm very grateful to be trained as an osteopath, and I was kind of pulled into it by I just followed what it was laid out in front of me, and I said yes. And but I learned we had this philosophy that the body has a self-healing mechanism. So as a physician, my job is to find out where you're stuck, provide a catalyst, and then get the hell out of the way and let your body do the work, so that you stay reliant on your own self and I empower you, not disempower you. And so for me, I feel the same way. It's like the system that I work in, I'm like, oh my God, no, you do the surgery as a catalyst when someone needs it to support the shoulder healing itself, not doing the healing for the person, in my opinion.
Yeah, And we share the same opinion. Yeah. A lot of what I did was really actually just talk to people who were about to get surgery and give them the tools to heal themselves. And I would say
Wow.
most people never got surgery. It's, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole we go down, but yeah.
Well, it's interesting, Trevor, because like, when we've talked about my shoulder, because I have injuries from hockey and mountain biking, and I've had some pretty good falls. A lot of it was, I would say, an aberrant movement pattern. And what I really liked about, you said something earlier where, and I'm paraphrasing, it's like kind of like taking small steps when they're the right time. And what I found really interesting is I'm doing a lot less and getting much better results by focusing on the quality of what I'm doing rather than the quantity. And then also sometimes it's really just like, it's just focusing on, it doesn't matter. I'm just doing I'm being present with it. And I'm like, oh, that shoulder feels a little like that. And, oh, I'm not activating my scapula and my rhomboids right now. And I'm not, and then I do. And I'm like, I celebrate that little win. Oh, that 1 out of 5 reps, I realized how to do it while holding the activation rather than going, I failed 4 times. I'm like, I succeeded 1 more time than I did last time.
And really what you're talking about is changing you. Like, you're changing how your nervous system operates, which is you. And so like, it's so cool to see, because everyone knows that you can lift weights and gain muscle, right? So we all acknowledge that you can change your body in that way, but then we forget that like you can change your nervous system in any way that you want to change it, as long as you're purposeful and practical about it, right? You go through the stages of competence, unconsciously competent to conscious, whatever, that whole
consciously competent, the whole 9.
Exactly. You just do that with anything, and you can change anything about yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree. You can change anything about yourself. And you notice how I was almost going to say, but, and because it's interesting because I had a business coach who taught me that. And we have movement coaches who teach us that. So I think as we listen, maybe that's an important one to speak. And what I've learned is like literally, it's like you just have to work with someone who can mentor you, because one of my teachers says you can't see the picture from within the frame. Yeah. So you need someone to look at what you're doing and then say, here are the small steps to take, and take them with compassion towards yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, I mean, that's The Art of Learning, Josh Waitzkin. I know he talks about that. Peak, I forget the author of that, talks about like having someone to guide you through the process is like, it's an integral piece. I couldn't even imagine. Well, actually I can. I tried to do it on my own for many years.
Guilty.
And then yeah, exactly. I think I said this on our call the other day. I wasted years of my life learning the lesson that you are wasting time, figuring out that you'd waste less time just with a coach. You know what I mean? Like, just get some sort of mentor that can see it for what it is. And also, I really like what you said, because a lot of people think that a coach is just there to tell you what to do. Like, yeah, you're doing this wrong, right? But how many times, like when you see a video from me, am I just telling you also to like have compassion for yourself, right? Hey, it's okay. You're doing great. You just need to do this.
I know, right?
Because we're our own worst critic. Everyone is their own worst critic, and
for sure,
you need someone to say like, yo, like, you got to quiet that down for a second. It's useful sometimes, but right now.
Totally remember that too, because I'm like, man, I'm a little tired. I kind of had a tough day, and I'm like, one thing didn't go the way, everybody in the group, and especially you, were like, yo, calm down, dude. It all looks great. You're like, you're learning, you're taking steps, and it's progressing. And I'm like, this is crap. And then I listen and I'm like, you know what? You guys are actually right. And that's the part I find about coaching and mentorship so great is it's great to learn how to do it better. But what's more important is how to treat yourself better and the friendships you develop. Because it's like, you know, all these calls we're doing, I'm just learning so much about you guys, and I'm excited to share the things I'm doing. And you're telling me a book, I'm telling you a book. And that's a part I wanted to really bring up. I heard you say, I just watched a TEDx talk. I'm reading about Steve Porges and the polyvagal theory. I have a morning routine. I have daily practices. I do different. And the thing that I just want everyone to really hear, at least, you know, it's part of my agenda, is that and I would love for you to talk about maybe some recommendations for how others can do this, but it sounds like you very purposely create your day. In fact, even when I asked you about the you know, sitting down to do this chat, you're like, well, I don't plan anything after this time so that I have a little bit of time to do things like this. And I was like, that's a really good idea to not book your whole day solid. So like, talk to me about, I think this is a great place to wrap all the things together. It's like purposely creating your day and purposely creating your life.
Well, it's so interesting because I was literally just writing about this. Yes, synchronicity. So I was just writing about this because, like, up until this point in my life, I've always considered myself as a movement coach, a content creator, and really what I was realizing just the other day is that what I'm really teaching people is like how to create a lifestyle that actually just that promotes feeling fulfilled in some way, right? And so and so like I was like, maybe I'm a lifestyle coach, I don't know, but cool question. So here we are. Now I get to talk about it. so okay, I would say the first place to start if you are really trying to implement like habits that, you know, a healthy like your ideal self does these habits, and everyone's going to have different ones, right? And I think that's actually a that is a exercise I take people through when I start working, is hey, like, let's think about you 3 years from now. What are the things that person does? What does that person think? And how can we get you there step by step? So then from that, we'll build out their day. And really where I like to start is starting with something that is already a fixture in your life, and then just starting to add a little bit to it. And nice. What does everyone do every day? They wake up and they go to sleep. So you pick one of those and you add something to it. So I wake up and I meditate. I wake up and I go for a walk, like whatever it needs to be, but putting it with something that's already there.
Right.
So creating structure from structure. And then next thing you know, you have like a cool morning routine and a cool evening routine. And you start to realize that like, oh, these routines, they don't take away from my time. They don't like suck anything from me. They actually really like brighten my day. They give me inspiration and they make me feel grounded and present. So how can I create a bit more structure around like other things too? And it just really like is one of those feedback loops that becomes just so empowering. And now it's to the point where like I look at my day and like I purposefully design my day so that I I get a lot of structure and I do a lot of the things that I know like are good for me and they make me feel good. And then I get to play with all those other times that aren't structured, you know? And like play is the most important thing to me in my life, is just finding those moments of flow and play. And so like it really allows me to fully commit to those things because I know the other structures are there to make me to get the things exactly, to get the things done that I need to get done, to get the things done that make me feel good. I don't have to think about those things.
Right.
They're in my schedule.
I love it because I always tell people, or for a long time, I should say, I told people that I didn't do well in structure. I'm not a very structured person. And so then my life was the opposite of that, very unstructured and chaotic. But then I realized that like some of the times where I'm in most flow is when I'm in certain emergency situations in my medical training in the hospital where there was a lot of structure, and that framework allowed me to freestyle. That's the word I love to use about that. But so then I started to restructure my day to have more structure. And the more structure I had, the easier my day was, the more flow it had, the more time I had to play, because I wasn't just floating around aimlessly. And I just love the way you put it, because it is, you create, by putting a small amount of structure, you create so much more freedom. And it seems counterintuitive to the North American mind.
Well, yeah, and I would say that like people really latch on to one or the other, but finding some sort of harmony between the two is really where I think people thrive. And like I definitely was more of like you, where I personally thought like kind of like the chaotic lifestyle was just how I was going to live the rest of my life, and it wasn't until I got a bit of structure that I started to realize that. But I also work with a lot of people who try to regiment everything, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
yo, like you need to schedule some time in your like already way too busy schedule for you to just sit down and do nothing and just like be bored for a second.
Right.
It feels great.
It's a friend of mine. He did this lecture one time on minimal daily requirements, and he's got like sleep, food preparation, family, and like work is like the last piece. But he talks about white space, and so I just love what you're saying about, you got to be bored, because out of the boredom you allow new ideas to come in.
Exactly, man. Yeah, I would say that's like that is probably one of the most important lessons that I learned personally in the last couple of years. Like I started my own business, and when you start, like you could always be doing more. It's just always there, right? You could be doing more content creation, you could be doing more marketing, and so you always like kind of feel this pull to continue to do stuff. And at some point it's just like, it's got to be in my schedule, time for me.
Well, it's just this dawned on me too, is what you were just saying, is we all are talking about how we schedule our days for, as entrepreneurs and as people who are out with missions to change, to essentially to alleviate suffering in the world, to help people understand they can take their power back and their control back. And I think about my patients, and so many of them want to do more because more is going to get it done faster or better. And what I just gleaned out what you're just saying is like, when I subtract, it actually is exponentially better. And I think in health, sometimes we can work out too much. We can try too hard with our supplements. Our diet can be too clean.
Yeah. Oh, I know people with eating disorders for sure that like have suffered from,
but they have a healthy diet.
Oh yeah. I worked with one of my buddies, he had an eating disorder from that. So yeah, I love what you said. Dang, I actually like, it's on the tip of my tongue. I forgot we had the eating disorder thing, and I literally forgot what I was gonna say. It's all good. Let's move on.
It'll come back too. What's interesting too is I think a lot of people, at least that I see, are struggling, and they say that what just happened to you is not normal when it happens to them. It's called brain fog, or I can't get my thoughts. I'm like, it's a normal thing. It may happen to you a little more often because of what you're working through at the moment. But it doesn't mean that most of the stuff we're experiencing, everybody experiences to some degree. You just might be experiencing a little more. It's like people like almost like thinking they should be robots. And, right?
It's funny because I remember what I was going to say anyways. So I think it's kind of like what you're just saying though. So culturally, like we've decided that like growth is the most important thing.
Oh yeah.
And the connotation, and I'm not saying that that's wrong, but I would consider growth. I think I frame growth differently than most people in at least our culture that we live
Right.
in, because growth comes with the connotation in our culture of more, always adding, like accumulating. That's growth. Whereas I think you and I would both agree a lot of times growth is actually stripping away, like exactly what you said, getting rid of whatever we're talking about, whether it be physically getting rid of things, or dropping some part of your ego that didn't serve you or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Stripping something out of your day. Like, I personally am at this point where, like, I'm coming to the realization that I need way less. Like, growth to me is getting rid of so much stuff, right?
Yeah. It's awesome because I just had this conversation right before we hopped on with my wife, where we have a program coming out, for practitioners to really help them get to the point where they feel comfortable doing the work that we do much more quickly. So they don't have to spend the 12 years I did to become an expert. They can do it like in a half a year to a year. And what's really cool about it was we had multiple options for how to make it happen. And I said, this one is really sexy. It's got a lot of bling. And I was like, that, but the one over here where it's just organic and I reach out to people and we do it like sort of one-on-one or one to a few. And it's like, it's just the stripped down version. It's the easy one. It's the one that feels right in my heart. I'm like, they're both probably going to impact the same number of people. And this one over here that I resonate most with might even do more. I love it, man.
Yeah, I mean, Josh and I have this conversation often. I think it's really almost the same exact conversation where it's like, to a certain extent, you want to attract people because you want them to hear your message. Like, yes, you're also running a business, but really you want to spread your message.
Yeah.
And you need to get their attention. So you kind of have to play the game a bit. And at the same time, you can really deliver what people need and also find what feels good for you. And so, like, there needs to be some sort of harmony with those things. And yeah, man, like, I'm sure it's exactly what you're talking about, is just like, how can I create the thing that feels the best for me and has because sometimes, like, if you go too far the other way, I mean, we see this all the time. People lose themselves to the marketing, and then the message ends up getting lost, because really, like, your message that you're trying to give people, it couldn't be true if the content you're putting out is actually true as well. It's like they just don't fit together.
I feel like you have to be congruent with what's inside of you. And so much of this marketing is just like how to build the funnel and do this other thing. But the problem is that's what works for the other person because it's congruent with who they are. And you need to show up in the world as who you are. And that's the marketing. You being true to who you are and getting your message out. And the same for health, guys. It's like when you show up, don't be looking for somebody else's health. And I try to teach this all the time, is it's not about, there are many paths to wellness and healing. There are many paths to being able to do, a movement practice. There's many ways to look. The goal for me is not to teach you all the paths out there. The goal for me is to help you find your path, which is almost exclusively different than my path.
Yeah, I mean, the way I like to conceive of it personally is I just give people tools, but they're the ones who have to build with them, And so I'm just trying to give you more tools in your tool belt. And that's it. Yeah, I mean, I think that was really well put. I love it.
Yeah, and I love the tools in the tool belt. And I think you've given everybody a lot of tools here, man. I think we could do this forever. This is, it's nice to keep chatting, but I just want to say thank you so much for spending all the time and dropping all this wisdom. So people who are interested in getting some more tools, like we've been talking about, where can they find you and how can they sort of reach out and get in touch?
So I would say number one place you could contact me would be my Instagram, the Trevor Hash, Instagram thing.
And I'll make sure we'll link
bad.
all this in the show notes so everybody will have it all just a click away.
Cool. Yeah, I just have to say this. I am so bad at like all of the like social medias. I was completely off of social media for a couple of years.
Right.
And I'm just now getting back to it with like starting my own business. And man, like I have been struggling with like finding the balance and like it's so easy when it's not a part of your life to say like, yeah, social media is a problem. I can't believe people do that. But then the second I try to like find a healthy way to do it, I'm like glued to my phone, like scrolling, and I'm like, why am I doing this? This is so bizarre. I literally hate this. But Ash. So, anyways, sorry, that's just an aside.
Dude, Trevor, it's so key though, man. It's so key because like for me, it's not my gig. I don't want to live on it. And I'm getting to the point where I have somebody else check it for me and tell me when I need to go do something. Like literally though, like I think the key that you're bringing up is you find the balance for you in the moment with what you're doing. So before you needed no social media, now you have a little bit of social. And I know you guys got some websites and stuff. So I'm sure you can lay them on us.
Yes, website. So my website is trevorhash.com. You can also find me at so Strength Side is Josh, my brother's YouTube and business, and I work with him. I create content with him. So Strength Side at YouTube or strengthside.com.
Awesome. And guys, if you're looking for a crazy cool, super sunrise with some sun in Colorado type morning routine, I totally think you should go check out Strength Side's morning routine that Trevor just dropped. I mean, it's like brilliant,
It was so much fun to make too. That's the thing. Content creation can be fun if you just do the stuff that you like to do,
Right. And that is such a great way to wrap this up, because literally like when you look at the smile on this dude's face, right? Like for anybody watching the video of it, and he's pumped. He's thinking about going to do the next morning routine because he's doing what he loves. And you don't have to do what Trevor loves. You don't have to do what Tom loves. You got to do what you love. Find it and go after it. And then it's just like, damn, I mean, as soon as you said that, your energy shifted. Look at me. You got me all riled up now. I'm like, let's go. Follow your passion.
Go to sleep right now so I can wake up.
Right? Cool. Hey, Trevor, thank you so much, man. This has been amazing. And, thanks everybody for joining us here. Check out Trevor. In the show notes, we'll have all of his clickable links. And I mean, amazing, brother. So grateful.
Yeah, thank you. And, I really love everything you're doing and your message.